Boop-a-doop-a-doo, boop-a-doo. Hope you're doing well. It's Friday afternoon. We're here to talk about Canada and how Mark Carney has delivered our clown world. So we need clown songs. Boop-a-doop-a-doo, bump-a-dum-a-dum, zoinks. Here we go. I'm joined by my regular guy likes to laugh about Canada with me, Dave. It's I wasn't planning on doing a show today, but I'll be honest, the failure of this week is too good to pass up. I had to catch up with you about all of this stuff. So I'm really glad you had time in the summer to do this, because this is a record-breakingly bad week for any leader in the history of anything that you ever want to mention. And we're going to have a good time talking about it today.
Yeah, you can't really go too long without discussing this stuff, or you're just going to have too much to discuss. Like, it's just
this is what I mean. It's been 2 weeks, and I actually gave up. Even though I had a golden amount of stuff last week, I got halfway through to when I was picking up stuff. So here's the thing. I'll even start just by setting the tone. This is as far back as I made it in looking at my notes. And to me, it's just like, imagine this was an issue, and I'm going to show you 2 weeks ago, and think of the 2 weeks we've had for Mark Carney and these guys since. So 2 weeks ago, we were told by the U.S. Homeland Security that we have a fracturing relationship with Canada. The United States and Canada have a fracturing relationship. Not really a lot of progress in the last 2 weeks. I'll start with this one. This is where it gets really good. This was his big effort. This was the highest point Carney reached in the last 2 weeks, and I'll share the video with you all. This is Trump realizing he doesn't like his chair at the G7 about 2 weeks ago, and he's complaining about his chair. And so Mark Carney notices this is I'm trying to show you the best thing Mark Carney did in the last 2 weeks, as far as like if it had a positive impact on him, his future prospects, and what's going on in the world. Have you seen this video? Dude. Donald.
So then, did they get Carney a new chair, or did he just have to sit in the broken one?
He knows. I think he got a peg. You got a peg. Is the audio coming through? Let me know in the.
There's no audio.
No audio. Oh, great. Okay. Well, anyway, I guess the stupid share thing is doing its thing. Sometimes the share does the sound, sometimes not. Anyway, you actually hear him say it several times, Donald. And then he comes and gives him his chair. So that was probably the best thing of the past 2 weeks that the Prime Minister of Canada, even here, Politico magazine did a puff piece, normally a friendly media, but even within it, the hardball that they described him playing probably doesn't come across that way. They said here, a quote from Politico, this is how Politico treated him. He amassed his power through the kind of grubby backroom hustle, all but unimaginable from the magnanimous statesman and technocratic economic policymaker that the former central banker plays on the world stage. That's Politico.
Backroom hustle, they say.
Not bad, huh?
That's coming really close to the word bribes.
There you go. The King of Davos at home, they say in their subtitle. Mark Carney's shocking year-plus consolidation of power. Not only that, this is from Politico. So then he's got CBC over the past 2 weeks consistently calling it out. Here's, for Americans who don't know, this is a ridiculous thing, but this is called, like, I don't know what they call it, the at-issue panel. It was called 20 years ago or something like that. It's sort of their premier news interview, like 10 o'clock thing they do, and they bring these politicos from different newspapers and blah, blah, blah. They're supposed to represent all the constituencies of Canada in some stupid way. They're a big joke. It doesn't matter. But even here, they're saying for 2 weeks in a row, that Carney is basically a illiberal bully, and that was 2 weeks ago. So you'll see the date on that one, June 19th. So 2 of these shows ago. Here's him being called a despot just last night, June 25th, by Andrew Coyne and these folks. They all agree everything he's doing to ram legislation. They even covered the Elizabeth May, saying it's the worst that the government's been in 15 years in terms of anti-democratic ramming of legislation and backroom deals and that kind of stuff. And then, even here, they try to get him on CTV. They bring a fella in. He loves Parliament. He's here. He doesn't, bribe and push his way through. And then, of course, he gets caught on one of these hot mic moments saying, Parliament, they're only useful for votes. It's pretty good stuff. Huh? So even on the Democratic platform, the moral high ground looks totally lost, even with normies. Even if Politico and CBC now is resonating in that way, you can actually say it to one of the sludge people in Canada, and it now lands because CBC has said it. I think you can actually now, if you're just in random conversation in Canada and a sludge person comes up to you and says, "Oh, aren't you pissed off that Brady Tkachuk and the Canadian hockey players don't want to play, or the American hockey players don't want to play in Canada?" You can just say, "Well, we have kind of an illiberal government, so I get it." You can actually land now.
Yeah, Carney's. It's funny they're trying to portray him as tough there, right? Because he's almost like a like the weird creepy guy in the office who sucks up to everybody and nobody likes him, and then he goes home and beats his wife.
Ooh, a little bit of that vibe. You're right.
It's he's an authoritarian quasi dictator at home, and he's just a bitch on the world scene.
Yeah. Watching him suck up to Trump like that was too funny, just to watch him. And it's the same as saying "Make America Great Again" when he was in New York about a month ago. It's time after time here where even normie Canadians are noticing he does the speaking out of both sides of his mouth, and he doesn't have the capacity, I would say, that I've seen anyway, the skill to smooth that over. He does the just don't bring it up and avoid and all that. You can do that. You can speak in politics in hypocrite. You can be hypocritical. No one really has a problem with hypocrisy in the end. It's sort of one of those accusations like you're a communist. They don't really care if you say that, right? Like that's not really a problem. Like it doesn't work either way, right? To persuade people. So hypocrite and stuff doesn't work. But in his case, because he tries to avoid it, that becomes the bigger question. Is that he pretends that we don't know. So it becomes an insult. It's not the hypocrisy itself of having conflicting points of view and being stupid like Trudeau and having completely diametrically opposed opinions just because it's better for politics. It's the space between where Trudeau could smooth this stuff over with some babbling nonsense, but in his case, he'll try to pretend like you don't see it, and that's an insult, and that's a different category, I think.
Yeah, it's really interesting because it's very core to the leftist belief that their cattle are very stupid, right? Like they obviously believe that people are not capable of making their own decisions, and with that comes the idea that they in their ivory towers are more enlightened and better, and that underestimation of the average person that the left has continued to do, really, like since COVID. They underestimated how many people would see through that shit, and they continue to underestimate how many people see through the transparently absurd nonsense that they're throwing out there right now. And that's there's this great awakening going on right now that we keep talking about it. More and more people are waking up, and every time they do something absolutely retarded and transparently evil, more people see it.
Well, again, the last time we spoke, I think it was when Russia, more or less declared war on Canada for the drones. And then we saw those Canadian drones actually go bomb Moscow. And it's like at a certain point, if you threaten people's financial well-being, their security. These stories get out. I mean, the drone and Russia declaring war on Canada hasn't really broken containment by any means. No one is even prepared to understand that level of identity that Canada has now gotten on the foreign stage. I mean, these are still people who think if we're not the best, we're still in second place. They don't really realize how much the bottom has fallen out here. So, I think of this stuff, though, in terms of, the domestic persuasion game is cracking for him in particular. And his ability to run the systems in their degraded state, as they already are in Canada, to even use those degraded tools, it looks like it's actually coming to its end. Just like we saw Keir Starmer have to leave in the UK. Say what you will about Justin Trudeau. Obviously, I'm not a fan, but there was a skill set there. As smarmy and ridiculous and retarded as those skills were, they allowed him to dodge and weave and get out of trouble like this. He brought me a lot less sense of optimism for what we could do, against this movement than Mark Carney. Mark Carney has struck me as the perfect candidate to encapsulate everything we hate about economists in the economy, and it's getting there. Like, here's Toronto Star even saying that. Here they're starting to notice his conflicts of interest. So again, it's important who this is coming from. We've all known his ridiculous Brookfield conflicts of interest. This stuff goes in the ecosystems that we're used to. But this is how you can see how much he's losing the room. You've even got Toronto Star. This is as lefty liberal backing as you can find. Come out and say the following, that he's sidelined from at least 17 government deliberations because of his corporate conflicts of interest. They're already questioning his effectiveness, right? And it's time after time like this. He doesn't have the skill set to fight against this stuff.
Yeah, Trudeau was like the embodiment of the idea that a politician needs to be a good liar.
Yeah,
and he's a fantastic liar, like probably the best I've ever seen, honestly.
Up there,
and right up there in terms of, like, when asked a really direct question for the third time in a row, he's able to give a perfectly coherent sounding answer without even touching on the question. And Carney is a departure from that, in that it's almost like he doesn't care. He just thinks everybody's so retarded they're going to keep voting for him anyway. Or he's just like not planning to ever have another election and hoping that he can consolidate power fast enough to physically control the population quickly enough.
Yeah, I wouldn't bet on it in his case. I mean, here's another one of the big stories this week that just shows how weak he's become. And here's one of these just, style stories. But here's him doing his review of the guards. It's, he doesn't know what he's doing. No one advised him properly. He's just making up the protocol. He's making jokes, weird body language. I don't know anything about this stuff. Apparently all the soldiers were really insulted. This was a big breach of protocol. I don't give a shit about any of that stuff. But I know that people crying about it are going to force him into some kind of action. He's going to try to either not address it, ignore it. Whereas Trudeau, right, like Marty up north says here, unlike Trudeau, something will stick to him. The guy is an idiot and an embarrassment. Trudeau would have been able to cook with this kind of stuff. Whereas in Canada, the news is so parochial anyway, even for the left. This is the kind of story they can really latch on to, even on the left, and make an issue out of it, or on the libtard world. And he doesn't look like he's got the skill set to reset the agenda or the talking points here.
Yeah, he's definitely like, the skill set is one thing. The biggest thing to me that stands out is the lack of situational awareness. Like, it's going back to, about a year ago when he was at the Calgary Stampede and he walked by and stole some guy's fries. And it's like, do you have no idea how that looks? Like, you're coming to Alberta and stealing our fries? It's just shocking.
The fries.
And it's just one after another. And some of them, they range from harmless, tiny acts of evil, like stealing someone's fries, to killing ostriches and going after our very basic freedoms. So, like, the guy doesn't have the ability to tell, like I should keep quiet about my evil plan, basically.
The best part is though, so when I even look at it, like we see again, we started this, what do the Americans think, and then showed right away that he's got a bad week of domestic failure, this style one, but it's also international failure here. Probably the worst thing that can happen to a sludge person like Mark Carney. And this is coming from the Council on Foreign Relations Twitter handle. If you guys don't know what that is, in the world of the deep state NGO think tank movers and shakers, this is the sort of alpha dog of all of that. This is one of the big primary, let's call it, narrative formation engines in the world for intelligentsia and all these people to talk about what's going on around the world and to sound smart, and where the credentialists are ultimately taking all of their barking orders from. It's Chatham House in the UK, and its corollary here in America, which is this thing here, Council on Foreign Relations. It's one of these big think tanks, and they had Jamie Dimon, part of the probably the most successful banker in the world. He's one of the big billionaire bankers. If people don't know, traders and all these guys make a lot more money than bankers. It's not a common thing to have a banker as rich as Jamie Dimon. That sets him apart from all other bankers. Even Mark Carney is nowhere near a billionaire, just so you guys understand the pecking order of how this stuff works in terms of who has the real money and who's out there still actually working all the time. Jamie Dimon is, a very rich guy. And here he is getting retweeted by Council on Foreign Relations, mocking and laughing at Mark Carney, calling his Davos speech a fantasy, and saying the middle powers thing that he came up with, yeah, it's Europe. What a dumb idea that was. They should have been on their own as countries. So here you're starting to hear Jamie Dimon mimic a lot of Trumpian MAGA world stuff. This isn't the first time he's done this. Last week, he was talking about the great arsenal of peace and about how America screwed up in offshoring manufacturing. He's starting to sing from Scott Bessant's songbook. And here he is aligning entirely with the American pivot in the world and leaving Carney out to dry again. So this is another one of those planks that would have normally held up the City of London edifice, maybe its biggest plank in America, basically telling him to fuck off. So this is a much bigger message than most people are realizing here.
Yeah, I think that that's where the real split has happened, is in between the sort of City of London old money and the American technocratic billionaire class. And that's Trump wouldn't be able to do anything that he's done without the support of that American billionaire class. And so that war that we've talked about so much between Trump and the City of London, where he's like pulling away pieces one after the other, like Jamie Dimon is very firmly in that American side. He's like one of the leaders of the American side, I would say. So makes sense that he would be criticizing a pawn on the City of London side.
But it's amazing to see now that it's public. Like Jamie Dimon was hosting King Charles's birthday just a few months ago, and he's capitulating here, capitulating there. I think the Iran war has made him more now. I guess you could say I'm a sucker for Jamie Dimon in a sense, because when I worked in New York, and I watched him operate by denouncing Bitcoin, I also knew what was happening under the hood, and I knew what kind of questions he was actually asking in the real world, because I was talking to people around him. And just the idea that someone would operate publicly the way he did, but would privately build and do stuff the way he was doing, really actually changed my worldview and made me, respect is the wrong word, I kind of marvel at Jamie Dimon's just capacities and abilities, as smarmy as they are, of course. But just watching him operate and understanding how he conducts himself in this world that you can't really see. I've always had a soft spot for him for that reason. It's like I learned a harsh lesson from him in life and reality. And so he's a real barometer for me still. Like I take his the references of his either capitulation or attack and advancement. This is not anyone who's going into a battlefield where he's going to lose and doesn't know what he's doing. He's going in here because the cover fires come in, the enemy is decimated, and he's coming in to take a couple scalps. And watching him take a Mark Carney scalp, again, I'm starting to put I understand what you mean about no more elections in Canada. Maybe they're going to have to really hit the pedal to the metal despotically in Canada, even more than we've seen. They're going to have it so that everybody knows they're despotic and they still do it anyway. Because I can't see Mark Carney being able to tame the beast any longer. He's getting it from all sides. Keir Starmer gone, these guys turning on him publicly, the banker class. And it gets worse because, the US deal is now getting blamed on him, and that bill is up this week on Canada Day.
Yeah. Amazing timing.
And here he is being, hung out to dry by Hoekstra personally. The fella here saying we should have been good to go. But Carney has done nothing. He hasn't even reached out. And now we found out just yesterday that Carney even had a call with Trump and didn't even bother bringing up the free trade agreement. Doesn't care. And now is saying, I don't care if we don't have a deal. So more failure. Can you believe this week the guy's having?
Yeah. I mean, it's one of these things where, like, you kind of can't believe it's still going on. You know what I mean? Like, at a certain point, there's got to be a line where, like, and if he keeps going, there'll eventually be something that's just like really pisses off all the boomer, like 65-year-old women in Toronto.
Well, we might be there. And my next story is maybe it.
And like, he'll just cross the line and he'll be done. And we'll see. But like, rationally, that line should have been crossed a long time ago. It's just,
of course, but no one's rational in this country. Look at this, sludge people everywhere, just pure ectoplasm. So Hoekstra, so that's one of those weird ones where it's like a widespread bruise to the economy, let's say, and that Canadians know how to digest, in the sense that they're not necessarily going to go pitchforking around and angry, right? They're used to a systemic problem in the economy. But one thing they're not used to, and that's the one that Carney has jumped in feet first this week, is the condo bailout story. And this one is just getting great. And this is where your narrative about boomers trying to kill him is, I think, this is where I think it's the end. We're seeing all the corruption around this. Gregor Robertson and all those folks, the former governor, premier of BC, who's his housing minister or something like that. And he's been meeting with all of the condo developers. So the basic story is no one's buying the new condos. They got, inventory problems. And Carney's trying to sell the plan. And it's not going very well. He's here every time he opens his mouth. It gets worse. Here he confirms that it is a bank bailout, but also a price floor for condos in British Columbia, and I suppose across the country.
I think this is actually right up the boomers' lane, because one of the only sort of pillars left in the Canadian economy is housing prices. And so there's the massive new build construction all across Canada, subsidized by the government, loan guarantee, all kinds of stuff. And now they've run into the entirely predictable but unforeseen circumstance where causing mortgage brokers to have to report cash payments to the anti-money laundering regulator has put a massive slowdown on the number of foreigners buying condos with cash in Toronto and Vancouver.
Even here, we saw our numbers of the day. It was 20% unoccupied of the new units sold.
Yeah, and that's really conservative, right? They're holding a lot of units off the market that are built, but they'll finish a building and they'll list one or two units. And then only those one or two units get included in the vacancy numbers, whereas really the rest of the building is sitting there vacant, because there's just
it's even worse than that.
Yeah, it's much worse than that, and you can see it.
I feel it. There's a few of these neighborhoods I've been to where all these buildings are, and I'm like, there's no way. These things have been open for years now. There's no way they're at capacity. It's Deadsville, like Deadsville.
And but propping up the condo market is part of propping up the property market as a whole. You know, if we're seeing these free fall pricing in Toronto and starting to spread to Vancouver, and if it completely collapses like that, it wipes out all of that savings from the boomers that he's hoping to harvest. Right? He's going to be going after that savings, either in the form of a unrealized capital gains tax, which he needs to get that through while property values are still really high, or like death inheritance tax. You know, he wants that boomer equity. So he's got to prop up the boomer equity if he wants to steal it.
Oh yeah, I see what you mean. I had seen it more as general anger at the economics might do him in. But what you're saying is this might be the only way he can keep one constituency together enough that they don't care about anything else.
Yeah,
I don't the same one he's already relied on. It's the elbows up boomer retards of Canada.
Yeah, exactly. It's just a bribe to support the interests of that group until he eventually sells them out as well. And it's, you know, like it's really just him that's going to do it, but like eventually there'll be some line that he crosses that he's not going to be aware of because he's not really aware of anything, and he'll kill the wrong ostriches or like sacrifice the wrong sacred cow, and the boomers will turn on him in a heartbeat.
Well, Ebby is not a boomer, but just to show you it's not going down smoothly, here's the governor or premier of British Columbia, current one, not the one who's in on the bribe with Carney, but here one that is currently elected, and he's saying that this is terrible and that he's pissed off about it. So it's got to, you know, he's going to have to try to sell it more, and this is what they got. They're actually going to market with this though, which leads me to believe they're going with your plan, that it doesn't really matter, no one cares about the answer. Because when asked to explain what's actually going on, they have a few of these ministers out there. Here they say that, you know, basically we don't know who's going to benefit, but, you know, maybe we'll figure it out. Maybe we'll see who's going to get help by this. Now, I'll say on the other end, though, you know, Poliver, all these press conferences he's doing, this stuff ain't working, man. This is no good. He keeps doing
to sleep while you were talking about him just now. So, like,
so he had a big plan, I guess, the other day for one of these press conferences where everyone's supposed to like sit there and listen to him for like an hour, go on about injustices. And I guess it was during the thing we had in Montreal with the guy who murdered the cop, and then, you know, the other guy got killed or something like that. Girl
that's the most Montreal story I've ever heard of.
With the porn and everything. Yeah.
The DEI police officer shot a rabbi coming out of Pornhub headquarters.
It's pretty good. Yeah. Well, we're not sure. No, we're not sure she shot him though. There is video evidence that a shot came from the side and all that stuff. It's not, it looked like it at first for sure. But we're not totally positive. But yeah, it was a very Montreal mass shooting, yeah, if you will. Not that it's funny, no one's laughing. Okay, it's a sad day. We don't like any of those types of events. But I guess Poliver was trying to do one of these press conferences during that thing. Oh no, because it was like a big deal when it happened, right? You know, a solemn moment and all that stuff, and he's there like, but what about my complaints? Not going very well. So you know, seeing that it's not going very well, he did this week, however, acknowledge that the separation movement in Alberta was real, and that it stemmed from an inability to offer big solutions and stuff like that. I mean, obviously he didn't do anything, but he acknowledged it. So what's the current status over there with that? No one going back to the Conservatives, I don't think. Probably more consolidation.
Yeah, I mean, faith has been lost in Polyev. I find I run into him about every couple of years at some kind of an event. Next time I do, I'm going to steal his lunch money because he's just
He's a dweeb.
He's a dweeb, and he's not helping. He's
a dweeb.
The more that I see from him, the more convinced that I am that they've actually just got something on him.
Yeah.
There's controlled opposition. Like he feels like a shadow of his former self in terms of the sharpness of his tongue and his willingness to go after the issues that the constituents that have elected him actually want him to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you haven't seen a single peep on the easiest issue possible, which is immigration.
Mm-hmm.
And you have all these, like across Europe, you have like center left parties coming out as anti-immigration.
Well, you know, to Carney, people say, I don't have the tweet here, but it was in my notes. I stored it. I just didn't pick it up this time, but I did have someone who did the numbers, and they said Carney is actually way more strict at the border. Now, anecdotally, I haven't seen it, and I'll go back to the story we had a couple weeks ago about the drugs and everything right on the flights. So I'm shocked at the laxness right now of entry into Canada. Frankly, the last couple of times I came in, I couldn't believe it how no one was looking. Turban, everyone was wearing a turban behind the thing, and no one looked at me once. It was just like right. And it looked like it was that for everybody. And I've always been asked questions when I enter Canada. There's always been questions. I've never entered the country until recently with just nothing. And now it's just nothing. You're just in. So, I don't know what they're talking about, but maybe just on applications. I don't know.
I mean, there's a bunch of layers, and they're using the stats that they can generate to make the fake case, that they're harder on immigration. You know, they're making it harder to get the student visas. They're in theory limiting the number of temporary foreign workers, but that doesn't mean they're rounding up people who are here illegally and who've overstayed their student visas or whatnot. And it certainly doesn't mean that they're cutting benefits to the millions of fraudulent asylum seekers. That's the big thing that we need to be doing. And, you know, if we stop being a target for these scams, many of the scam artists will stop showing up to scam us, right? Because that's really the way that we've set it up, is that, you know, we're not going to be getting their doctors and lawyers, if there are any that we want over there. We're going to be getting those who want a free handout and a free meal. And that's the system that we're in. And until you close that loophole, there's no such thing as tough on immigration. We're just literally paying for the third world to occupy our cities.
Yeah. Or like, well, you had that, I thought that was a really, interesting, let's say, discussion around the call to prayer in Regina happening now. And, I saw the law in which they applied. It's once a week. It's a reasonable accommodation. I get it. I see why they would do it. But it's true, the idea of them, why, first of all, even publicize it. And when you realize the way you do with your AI, that you have to reverse the headlines basically to make them make sense. I saw Ezra Levant did that, and it made more sense when it wasn't that the city was testing the call to prayer. It's the call to prayer was testing the city, because it's obviously the point is not one day, it's many days. And I didn't know this. I saw the numbers about what happened to Sudbury and Thunder Bay and Sault Ste. Marie in terms of rehousing immigrants and stuff. Apparently, these places have zero heritage Canadians anymore. That's what I'm told. I didn't know that. I haven't been to these places in a long time. But is that true? Is that really what happened in Northern Ontario?
Yeah, I haven't been to Northern Ontario either, but I've heard lots of places in Canada are inundated. You know, we're a little bit more isolated from a lot of it here. We're not doing as well as Quebec is. Like, Quebec's language police really at least keep like a good chunk of the immigrants out, which is great.
I used to hate them. Now I love them.
I mean, could we have an English language police here?
Even look, we had our Saint Jean 2 days ago, right? And that's our Canada Day, I guess you will, in Quebec. And all Quebec stuff, all, as we say in Quebec, pure laine, everything about the Quebec culture, Quebec history. We'll have Canada Day in 2 days. It's going to be Indian spring rolls. They're going to mix every food in the world into a poutine. and it's going to be some slop, and no one, it's not going to make any sense. It's going to be incoherent, loud, annoying. I won't go. But it's amazing they still have that. Like it's amazing that you can still find that in some place. It's not a common thing. Canada, I don't think there's a Canada Day in Canada that would look like the Canada days that we had when we were kids. I just don't think it's possible.
No,
I don't think it exists.
The enthusiasm for the country has faded quite drastically, except among those who have recently shown up to get a free lunch. It'd be a pretty sweet deal to go from living in the slums of India to collecting $8,000 a month living in Toronto or Sudbury or wherever, and that, that's who's showing up to these World Cup parades. Like, you can just see the demographics.
I haven't seen so many Canadian flags since the truckers.
Yeah.
Which was really the end of the Canadian flag.
And there's no Canadians carrying those Canadian flags.
No. And it's amazing seeing that contrast, because indeed people are showing up in Canada, and just as America is enjoying this huge, shocking reaction to Europeans arriving, and then just seeing the rural or southern lifestyle being completely not what they thought it was, and being overwhelmed with optimism by the differences they're seeing, and being surprised that, because the Europeans have this idea that America is like 1% of people have everything, and they live behind a gate, and they kill everybody with their guns who comes near them, and everybody outside of the fence is clawing each other to death and eating each other's flesh outside of hospitals that won't give them service unless they give them the mortgage to their house and their car and everything. They really believe that about America, but they've all got ice and air conditioning, so that it's all happening under full air conditioning. And as they arrive and they see just the average person's house and everything, it goes back to really the Revolutionary War. That was the first time these British people realized they had to keep the truth about America from Europe, because the Hessian soldiers they hired, the original German soldiers for hire that King George hired to go and kill revolutionary Americans 250 years ago, capitulated the minute they saw the homes of the people on Long Island, and they said, "Whoa!" This is in the David McCullough book, 1776 or 1775 or whatever. And the minute they looked at these homes, they said, "We how could anyone fight against this? That this is how the average person is living over here. I don't care what you tell me about them. This is good. I'm fighting with them." And ever since, there has been a problem that Europe has to have this idea that America isn't the wealthiest and isn't the most successful and isn't the greatest empire that ever lived. And now this World Cup is sort of proving the point, but you're seeing the opposite come true with Canada, where people are coming expecting a stereotypical first world, even more advanced than America, and they're finding indeed it's a third world shithole. And it's shocking. Imagine a Latin American coming to Toronto and then lifting their nose up because it's a shithole. Could you imagine that 20 years ago?
Yeah, and it's really crazy how dilapidated Canadian cities have become. Like how
Montreal, thank you.
Well,
thank you. I know why. Thank you. I always
Montreal
thank you.
Has its own.
I always thank you. I appreciate it.
The pylons and the construction are its own kind of dilapidated, right?
We are blessed. We are blessed.
Strangely, I think Calgary and Edmonton are doing the worst job of essentially managing the crackhead problem. And between all the Indians and the crackheads, Canada has just become a much dirtier place in the last 5 years. And like, for some reason, like, Montreal, they've got the reserve right there. They mostly stay over there. The Montreal, Toronto, and Vancouver police do a much better job of like moving the crackheads along and not letting them become a
Giuliani them here. Toronto.
Yeah. And like, even in Toronto, like, I remember going to Toronto in 2022 and they really had let it go through COVID.
I was there with you. I was there.
Yeah. Right. There was I remember being like right on Bay Street, like the banky part of Bay Street. And there was like a guy who was passed out on the sidewalk at like 1 p.m. who had pissed himself at like in the middle of Bay Street on the sidewalk. And everybody was just walking around him. And it like that's the kind of thing that they still allow in Calgary and Edmonton, whereas they've kind of at least in those other places been like, move it along, get out of here to wherever they send them. I don't know where they send them
We
in
bust
Toronto.
our tent cities up every couple of months here. They grow in certain places, and they just come in one day, operation, get them out of here, and they throw it all in the garbage and plow it all down, and that's the end.
And it's been interesting because the Calgary police just started a new campaign making it seem like they're cracking down on these people. Might be just like ahead of Stampede, but it like, we'll see if it actually sticks at all.
The delta you've experienced in Calgary is the greatest because it was the finest and cleanest city, I would say, in the world, honestly. And I've spent a lot of time in Singapore and in Switzerland. It wasn't even compared to rich Calgary of 20 years ago.
Yeah.
That to me was the most, I've never seen a city like that. And it made me proud, that there was a city like it confirmed as a Quebecer to be aligned with Harper and the Conservatives and all the Albertans, like I was politically at the time. To me, it just was one of these confirmations that it was like, okay, this is how Canada should be. It should be Montreal and Calgary, and Toronto can, fuck off. They'll figure it out as we go along here, but we're going full energy. And unfortunately, drama teachers, other stuff happened. And look how much the country's changed. That's our last story. The hockey players don't want to play. They hate them now. Imagine. Will this be the final straw that breaks the camel's back in Canada? Because Canadians they cry about a lot. They have not stopped crying since they lost this hockey gold medal for the Olympics, but the losing of that gold medal has continued, and the gold medal loss story seems to be metastasizing into something else. And just as we said when they lost the gold medal, does this Canadian hockey identity thing that's going on that now looks probably lost forever. I've seen the numbers in terms of how many Americans are in the NHL. It looks like the American love affair with hockey is just getting started here. And that might have been the last time we can even beat them. I don't know. We'll find out. But now losing these stars because of the inhospitability of Canada, that's something new. People say this was taxes. No, people will pay the taxes for winning. And people don't understand. They have so many tax mitigation strategies for Americans or wherever else comes to the NHL. They have a bunch of scams. They pay them in the summer when they're not around. They can front load it when they're not a tax resident, when they get this and that. They can do all kinds of trickery to get around paying Canadian taxes. They do not pay Canadian taxes like you, a W-2 holder, or whatever we call it in Canada, a normal employee filing taxpayer. That's not what's going around. Molson Company for years has given people summer jobs and stupid shit like that to hide the money and find new ways to pay them that, shields them from taxes. So taxes are not, they can say all they want, it's a tax decision. No, I don't think so. If you're winning, they'll find a way around it and they'll still play in Canada. And a team like Montreal or Toronto can't ever say they don't have enough money. Of course they do. So here, this really was a case, I think, of hatred, Canadian ugly hatred coming through.
Yeah, it's really bizarre that the sort of like anti-hate group, the segment of the left has become really the most hateful group out there. And you see these little videos. My Instagram feed is a hilarious mix of like AI videos and vigilante justice.
That's all anyone's talking about, huh?
And the vigilante justice ranges from these people who go and show up and like just have a very reasonable conversation with these screaming irrational leftists protesting all over the world. And, without fail, these people are like either becoming violent or near violent. The rage is in their eyes, you can tell.
Well, my wife was just saying that to me. She says, you can go now and do something that you couldn't before, which is just watch people interact with, coffee baristas and these sludge people who are so angry about all these things all the time and are so hateful. She says it's a weird thing where since COVID, they can't hide it anymore. It's on their face in every interaction. You can really, really see it without speaking to them. And you couldn't really judge someone's politics just by being in line with them and no one says anything, 5 or 6 years ago. Now there's like an energy that comes with these people that right away you can tell everything about them and every opinion they'll have about every issue because of their intolerance and hatefulness about everything. Like the people who have the real TDS and the real anger about stuff.
Yeah.
The mental illness thing is the real problem here, and it's growing in Canada.
And you can feel it when, there are certain places where, as like, a fairly obviously straight white man, like I'm not welcome. And like there's a bookstore down the street that is like noticeably uncomfortable to walk in there looking like a regular dude who probably doesn't believe the same. Yeah,
It's crazy, man. Well,
they're losing the plot.
The lag there. Which we like. We like that they're losing the plot because, like I said, if you look at what's going on in the United States, the good news is the political debate is the whole narrative, and Canada is going to get caught up in this too. So it's good. The fake political debate of liberal, conservative, red, blue, it's all falling apart. You're seeing it now as the makers and the takers. You're seeing it very clearly as parasites versus builders. You're seeing explicit communism, but you're not seeing, capitalism. I don't think it's the opposite of communism in a sense. I know people say them that way all the time. But what we're seeing in the United States is more or less what Quebec already has in terms of an economic system. We hear about the Henry Clay American system. We hear about Hamiltonian politics coming back to America. That looks just like what Quebec has with our sovereign wealth fund that, thank you, Alberta, we have, and the Hydro-Quebec thing, right? Because that's really what the AI moonshot is. The AI moonshot is more or less what Quebec has already built. And when I think about, this is where people don't really see why Quebec is, I think, going to lead coming out of the destruction of Canada, and why even Alberta is going to model itself after the Quebec model, which is this American model, which is a form of state-directed concentration of capital into certain types of build-outs that give this material benefit to everyone in society. I've made this example for a while of this bridge here and the train that goes over it, which was entirely built by the Caisse de dépôt et placement, the sovereign wealth fund of Quebec. It uses the electricity from the public utility Hydro-Quebec, and was built because they're used to operating these things privately. There's no pilot, there's no union of workers. It was built for like a quarter of the cost per mile of public transit that a normal state-sponsored subway would be built at. This is an exportable model that the Caisse de dépôt in Quebec can actually now build for other jurisdictions and say, hey, we can build this public infrastructure. We found a way to build it way cheaper. And when I think about what Quebec is building and what they've already achieved, you can see why it's not going to be a big pivot for Quebec and Alberta to figure out what's going on. The only thing in their way now is the takers and the parasites, and that's Ottawa. And in general is going to be seen that way. That's why the Quebec vision of what Ottawa is and the Alberta vision of what Ottawa is are, I think, Ontario's not going to be rich enough to stop it from becoming what Canada is. And that means there is no more Canada.
Yeah. What do you think? How do you think they managed to construct that bridge more effectively than?
Well, having the Quebecers already support, all this debate about your referendum, I think is a start. You want to train Quebecers to support Albertans instinctively in their crusade for sovereignty against the federal government. So habitually aligning each other in a shared struggle, I think will result in a lot of good things. I mean, you got to hope for fights with Ottawa. You got to hope they meddle in your referendum. You need some muddy shit. They have to. The worst thing that can happen is if Carney ignores the whole thing, and it's boring. What you want is for them to get involved and have a plan, and they're gonna attack, strategy, and you need them to embarrass themselves and fail, and then you get Quebec as a support and as a backstop, and I think that just makes it all grow together. And then I think Quebec has to do its own soul searching when it comes to being plugged into transnational commie environmentalism. But that we were kind of collateral damage in that. It's because it flattered us. And so we went all in because it was like wow, Quebec has it all figured out. So we saw it as like an advantage. It wasn't that we weren't even valuable enough to turn to any political side. It was just because we like to be liked. And all the sludge people were like, "Oh, you're great," and we're like, "Yes, nah, of course." But the hydroelectricity is great, and they just have to get off the high horse of environmentalism and realize that there's a lot they could do with Alberta, and it's going to come together in the north because Quebec is going to pioneer and innovate in the north, and when Ottawa dies, the north becomes Alberta's frontier. No one else will have the capacity to take it the way Alberta does. Someone has to take it, and it's going to be Albertans. It's going to get too crowded down there. There's going to be too much money, and there's no claim to the Arctic. So I think we come together in the Arctic eventually. Quebec is a little ahead, and even in my time when I was working with Harper, they were funding all these energy build-outs for the miners up north. Those were Quebec firms building the windmills. Make sense in the Arctic. Like, they actually work up there because the wind never stops and they whip around, and it's better than the sun. The sun doesn't work for shit up there half the year. So wind, I'm not a wind guy because of the ugliness and the whales and all that stuff and the nice countryside. But in the Arctic, you're fucking right. Throw them up there, man. That goddamn hell-forsaken moonscape can take wind power all day. You can't even drill into the ground to do anything else. Go wind, wind, wind. So those were Quebec firms that built a lot of that stuff. And, we're outfitters for Arctic mining in a way that I don't know exists in the rest of Canada. I'm sure Alberta has something equivalent, but I think Alberta and Quebec meet up north with, shared pursuits of what's up there.
Yeah, I could see it. We'll have a summit to determine the end of Canada.
It has to be, and it has to be. Where
do we host the summit?
Well, Quebec needs to take over. There's a portion of Ontario that they should not have, and it's everything north of Kingston, right to Sudbury, basically. They got to be cut across there, and a bunch of that French farmland has to rejoin Quebec. Even the Kawarthas, to a certain extent, or the Rideau Lakes and everything.
And Quebec wants Labrador.
That has to. It's not that it wants. There's no way we can allow anything less than a sub-constitutional alignment because of the actual hardware we built. Churchill Falls are in Labrador, but ain't not one Newfie built that thing, other than maybe carrying some rocks. But I'm sorry, this was not capable. They were not capable of building Churchill Falls. Like, that was a Quebec project, and we didn't have to build it there either. We could have picked other spots. It just so happened it was the best spot, and we liked it. It was the best flooding plan. Blah 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 blah. So, if it was true that we weren't going to be in a country together, we wouldn't have built it there. And so now that it's already built, you simply can't rent it from them. Even if your rent deal is the big joke and is constitutionally, it's where the Newfie joke comes from, how bad it was for them. Even then, it's a question of sovereignty. You cannot allow that dam to go anywhere else. It's Quebec territory. So if you're going to blow up the line, what's the point? There's nobody there. Like, why do they, royalty deals or something, but they don't need to administer it. They don't have any money anymore. They're not, without Canada giving them welfare. What the hell are they supposed to do with Labrador? Like, They're not exactly like industrious,
Yeah, they're not flush
like
over there.
they're not in a rush. They're not in a rush. They'll be better off going to smoke pipes in Ireland and joining the British system. I actually think that would be a good fit for Newfoundland, is to go British Isles, and however they rebuild and join economically and everything there. I think they have a much tighter fit with that than maritime Canada or Quebec or anywhere else in the continent.
I agree with that, but I tend towards the idea that we don't need to amalgamate more countries. We need to break up more countries, and ultimately Newfoundland will be better off alone.
Yeah, well, what I would do is I would do the Isle of Man model. The Isle of Man is not beholden to Parliament. You know that, right? It's beholden to the king. So I would go back through the actual sovereign. That's why they don't have any rules in the Isle of Man about speed limits, or they're entirely self-governing, because they're not a product of Parliament. That's their beautiful freedom that they have, is they were too hard to attack because of the walls and everything. And so in the end, they got a sweetheart deal with the king where they have to give him like 2 falcons or something every generation. And that's their only payment for him to be the king of Isle of Man. And he can't actually do anything. They have their own, way they govern themselves. So I would say for Newfoundland, that's the kind of thing you want. You're just connected by a fake sovereign, and you have 100% freedom in your laws, not Parliament, not a British thing. Not that. That's the thing. They're not British. They are They're part of the English British Isles, but they're not Britain. So that's a huge distinction. They're part of the kingdom, but not the political structure of the United Kingdom.
Yeah, something like that make a lot of sense. They are also like pretty mired in the brain virus of socialism.
That's
and they're used to the free money pouring in, and you got to work 13 weeks a year in the Maritimes to get your unemployment.
What is it, 600 hours or something like crazy? Like,
yeah, so it's like
640 hours is what the fishermen.
They're going to need to go through some pain, I think, before they can come out from the other side of it, something like that. But the Isle of Man is exactly what they should be looking at. Is like, how can you thrive as a beacon of freedom? And if you they've got oil offshore there. If you were to just unleash so much capitalism on the Newfoundland economy, it would be booming
and they'll always have free electricity. That's the thing. We have to supply them too. It's a two-way street. That's why they were crying all those years about the 1967 locked in electricity rates after we built the whole thing. But fuck you. Like, we give you free shit too, man. You get fucking electricity at the yin yang. They got that big cable that goes right in there, man. That's a lot of electricity that goes into Newfoundland. They got unlimited for their population. And cheaper than the Maritimes. The Maritimes, they live expensively. People don't realize how expensive the Maritimes are. They see the houses are cheap in Newfoundland or in Nova Scotia and stuff like that, but utilities, get out of here. They pay a lot for electricity. They get ripped off, man. Yeah, totally. And they got all that coal too. They got to get a coal plant back there. They need all that stuff fired up again. Well, it'll be all over soon. Next week, it's going to be it's my anniversary, so we're not going to do a show next week, but we'll get together in 2 weeks and talk over. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of failure between now and then.
Sounds good.
It was a really historic 2 weeks, though, of failure. I mean, it's hard to believe it's all real. I've never seen a worse 2 weeks of a politician in my life than Mark Carney had. From the chair straight through, I've never seen anything like this.
It's impressive.
It's impressive. No hope out. So there you go. All right, friend. Take it easy, man.
Take care.
There's Dave for the day. Fuck you, Newfoundland. How many Newfies does it take to build a hydroelectric dam? Few icebergs. They've got nothing. Moose aren't native to Newfoundland. I didn't know that. Sudden onset Toronto face. People get uglier and dumber by the day down here in Toronto. Quality of people is way down. I bet. And it used to be beautiful. The people used to be really attractive in Toronto. The Toronto good looks were something I noticed when I first moved there from Montreal. I said, wow, there's a lot of good looking people here. Good for them. And I agree. You don't see it as much anymore. People get uglier and dumber by the day down here in China. Quality of people is way down. Very funny. Very funny. Do Canadian kids get vaxxed as much as American kids before they enter kindergarten? I swear that millions of Americans. Yeah, it's probably not as much. There's probably less of a financial incentive, but there's definitely dumping grounds for product in Canada. So whenever it came into the dumping ground stage, that's where Canadians will get it. So real bottom of the barrel protocol. Not even the entrepreneurial how to get more needles in them to move product. More like, where can we dump this shit? And then they go and get a procurement deal with Canada. I'm just guessing, though. I have no idea. None. Have a great weekend, everyone. Indeed. Appreciate the show, says CB Van. Enjoy the time off, crew. Indeed. Happy anniversary, Nolan. Thank you, Johnny Midas. Yeah, next week it is going to be July 3rd. And then I'll be around for the 250th anniversary of the beautiful United States of America on July 4th, 2026. Should be fun. All right, so I'll be back live. Not many live shows in general next week. I'll pop in 1 or 2 times, I think, for the morning show. But I'll be out and about most of next week. I've got a lot of things to do. And so that is the end of this week, as I said. A little reduced summer show load, not really a ton of news and all that stuff. So we'll go ahead and see you all then. Okay, folks. Peace. Take it easy. Thanks for watching. Ciao.